She humiliated me. I vanished, leveled up, and returned to win.
You're so boring, Jeffrey. Honestly, I don't know why I even bother with you anymore. Rose's words echoed through the crowded university cafeteria. Her chair scraped the floor with a harsh screech, and every head turned. She didn't lower her voice. She wanted them to hear. She wanted everyone to witness my humiliation. Arthur, her new boyfriend, smirked across the room, his designer watch catching the fluorescent light as he waved mockingly. The same Arthur who had copied my homework months ago was now the golden boy, the one with the Ferrari and the trust fund. "What do you even do for fun?" Rose continued, louder, theatrical. "Study, read books," I mumbled. "God, you're like an old man trapped in a 22-year-old's body." Laughter rippled around the tables. Phones came out. Cameras pointed at me. I imagined the memes already forming. Alicia, Rose's best friend, nodded eagerly. "I told you, Rose, you deserve someone exciting, someone ambitious, someone who can actually take you somewhere nice." Her eyes swept over my thrift store clothes, worn sneakers, and duct-taped backpack. I sat frozen, my half-eaten sandwich forgotten. 2 years. 2 years I thought we were building something real. 2 years of walking her to class, supporting her through exams, listening to late-night fears. 2 years believing that love alone could matter. "I'm sorry, Jeffrey," she said, though her tone suggested anything but remorse. "I can't pretend anymore. You're boring." She turned and walked away, heels clicking against the linoleum. Arthur met her halfway, wrapping his arm around her waist. The cafeteria slowly returned to normal, but I could still feel the whispers. The boring guy. The nobody who thought he could keep a girl like Rose. I picked up my tray with trembling hands and walked to the trash, throwing away not just my lunch, but everything I thought I knew about myself. My name is Jeffrey Collins, and until that day, I thought I knew who I was. Quiet, reliable, dependable. I worked 2 part-time jobs, lived in the cheapest dorm, wore thrift store clothes, ate cheap takeout. Rose was everything I wasn't. Outgoing, confident, effortlessly beautiful. She came from money, the kind that bought country club memberships and vacation homes. Yet somehow she had loved me, or so I thought. She used to say, "You're so different, Jeffrey. You're real. You care about things that actually matter." Late-night library study sessions, vending machine snacks, philosophical conversations, they had felt like love. I had offered simplicity, attention, and stability. Arthur Morrison offered wealth, status, and spectacle. He was failing classes, didn't care about grades, but his last name guaranteed success. Alicia, Rose's best friend, came from old money. She had never liked me, subtly pushing Rose toward Arthur. "Rose deserves better," she'd mutter. And she was right, at least by their standards. The humiliation didn't end in the cafeteria. Overnight, social media exploded. Someone had recorded the scene. When keeping it real goes boring. Hundreds of shares, memes, whispers. In class, Arthur arrived 20 minutes late, leather shoes clicking, cologne expensive enough to make my stomach twist. He chose a seat behind me, close enough to taunt. "Hey, boring boy," he whispered. "How's life without a girlfriend?" Snickers echoed. I fixed my eyes on my notebook, hands shaking. After class, he cornered me outside. "Look, Jeffrey, no hard feelings, right? Rose just upgraded." He pulled out a photo, Rose laughing in his Ferrari, dressed in an outfit I could never afford. French dinner downtown, more than I made in a week. I wanted to punch him, scream, rail against the unfairness of it all. Instead, I walked away. That's what boring people do. They take the abuse and pretend it doesn't hurt. But the worst was yet to come. During lunch, I overheard a conversation at the table behind me. My blood ran cold. Alec here was talking to a group of sorority girls, her voice carrying across the dining hall. The funniest part is that Jeffrey actually thought he had a chance with Rose long term. Like, seriously, a scholarship kid from the wrong side of the town thinking he could marry into our social circle. Cute in a pathetic way. Another giggled. Didn't he say he was planning to propose after graduation? Oh my God, yes! Alicia's laughter was sharp, cruel. He'd been saving up for months for some tiny ring from a discount jewelry store. Rose even showed me the website he'd bookmarked. It cost less than my monthly manicure budget. My appetite vanished. They were right. Every spare dollar from my part-time jobs, the campus bookstore and the coffee shop, had gone into that small savings account. I'd planned to propose after graduation. I'd even spoken to Rose's father about it. He'd been polite but distant, probably already knowing what his daughter really thought of me. Arthur's ring budget is probably bigger than Jeffrey's entire college fund, another girl sneered, and they all dissolved into laughter. I left the dining hall, aimless, until I found myself in the small garden behind the library where Rose and I used to study. That's when the scope of my humiliation hit me. This wasn't just about losing a girlfriend, it was about being exposed as someone who had fundamentally misunderstood his place in the world. That evening, my roommate Mike tried to cheer me up. Dude, forget her. Rose was always kind of shallow anyway. You're better off without her. Even his support felt hollow. Everyone could see what I hadn't. I was the charity case who got ideas above his station. 3 days later, the breaking point came at my shift in the campus coffee shop. Rose walked in with Arthur and Alicia, laughing as they approached the counter. The wedding will be at the country club, obviously, Alicia said. Daddy already spoke to the event coordinator about next summer. Rose beamed. Arthur proposed last night. She held up her hand. The diamond ring sparkled. Massive. Probably worth more than everything I owned combined. Arthur spotted me behind the counter. 3 lattes, Jeffrey. Make them good. We're celebrating. He emphasized my name mockingly. My hands trembled as I prepared their drinks. Less than a week after dumping me for being boring, Rose was engaged. As they left, she looked at me directly for the first time since the cafeteria incident. "Oh, Jeffrey," she said, voice dripping with false sympathy. "I heard you've been having a hard time. Maybe this is a good learning experience about managing expectations, being realistic." I managed, barely above a whisper, "Thanks for the advice." That night, I sat alone in my dorm room, staring at my laptop screen. $3,247. My savings account. Months of sacrifice, choosing ramen over real meals, walking to work instead of taking the bus, reduced to a number on a screen. Graduate with decent grades, find an entry-level job, live paycheck to paycheck. Meanwhile, Arthur would inherit a business empire, and Rose would live in luxury. They'd tell stories at dinner parties about the boring guy who thought he was good enough, and laugh. Kindness didn't pay rent. Reliability didn't impress anyone. Loyalty was worthless without capital. I had been fighting with weapons that no longer mattered. Then I made a decision that would change everything. I began researching something I'd never seriously considered: dropping out of university. Not to give up, but to start over completely. If Rose thought I was boring because I was poor, I'd show her how interesting money could make a person. The next months were brutal. I withdrew at the end of the semester, telling my parents I needed a break. My mother's disappointment still haunts me. She'd worked double shifts for my education, and I was throwing it away. I couldn't explain that this wasn't about Rose. It was about everything she represented. I used my savings to rent a tiny studio in the warehouse district, far from anyone who might recognize me. Water-stained ceilings, a clanging radiator, loud neighbors. Barely habitable, but mine. And, for the first time, I could disappear completely. Loneliness crushed me. Friends stopped calling. Even Mike's texts eventually stopped. I was erased from existence. Exactly what I wanted. but it hurt more than I'd imagined. Days blurred into research. The public library became my office, my corner table a fortress of business books and worn composition notebooks. I read, learned, planned. Social media influencers, startups, cryptocurrency trends. I devoured everything. Self-doubt never left. No experience, no capital, no connections. Every night, lying on my mattress, I wondered if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Maybe Rose was right. Maybe I was boring, unremarkable, destined for mediocrity. Then I remembered the smirk, the laughter, the look in her eyes. The humiliation became fuel. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for me. 6 months later, a breakthrough. I noticed patterns in cryptocurrency trends and online markets that others ignored. I started small, building a budgeting app for students who couldn't afford expensive software. I tested it in forums, refined it, grew it slowly. Within 3 months, over 10,000 users. Small fees covered expenses and reinvestment. The money wasn't huge, but it was mine. Earned. No inheritance, no trust fund. I avoided social media, avoided anyone from my past. Rose, Arthur, Alicia, they didn't exist in my world anymore. The physical transformation came gradually. Better posture, gym workouts, better clothes, a haircut that didn't make me look invisible. Confidence replaced the slouch of someone who expected to be overlooked. By the end of my first year away, the app had funded 2 additional projects. I still lived in my crappy apartment, ate cheap meals, but now by choice. Isolation became protection. Failure became experimentation. I was becoming someone I could never have been if I'd stayed with Rose. But at night, doubts lingered. Was I building something meaningful or just proving a point no one would care about? Then, 18 months after my disappearance, a chance encounter shattered everything I thought I knew about my past. I was having lunch at a small diner downtown when I overheard a conversation that would change my life again. I thought I knew about my past. I was sitting in a back booth reviewing quarterly reports for my expanding business portfolio when 2 middle-aged men sat behind me, their voices carrying in the nearly empty diner. Morrison Industries is hemorrhaging money. Arthur's father has been covering it up for years, but the quarterly reports don't lie. They may be 6 months from bankruptcy. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Morrison Industries. Arthur's family business. The kid doesn't know, does he? The second man shook his head. Arthur still thinks he's inheriting an empire. Robert Morrison would rather die than admit the truth to his son. He's been propping up the stock with borrowed money and creative accounting. When it all comes out, the scandal will be massive. I set down my fork and listened, pretending to read my documents while absorbing every word. What about the engagement? Didn't Arthur just marry that restaurant owner's daughter, Rose Lou? Yeah, that wedding was 3 months ago. Biggest society event of the year, according to my wife. But here's the interesting part. Robert Morrison specifically chose her because her father's restaurant chain is one of the few profitable ventures left in their portfolio. The marriage was essentially a business merger disguised as romance. My blood ran cold. Rose had married Arthur, but their relationship had been orchestrated for money, not love. Neither of them knew how dire their financial reality really was. Robert Morrison had been juggling creditors and falsifying reports to keep up appearances. They'd be lucky to keep the lights on through the end of the year. After the men left, I sat stunned. Everything I'd believed about Arthur's superiority and Rose's choice had been an illusion. Arthur wasn't the successful heir I'd imagined. He was a pawn in his father's desperate schemes. That evening, I did what I hadn't allowed myself in 18 months. I looked Rose and Arthur up online. Their wedding photos matched exactly what the dinermen had described. Rose was radiant in a designer gown, Arthur in a custom tux. Every inch the picture of success. But I saw it differently now. Rose's smiles seemed forced. Arthur's eyes held that same tension I'd glimpsed in my own mirror during those months after graduation.
Digging into public records and financial filings, I confirmed it. Morrison Industries had been in decline for years, propped up by desperate measures. Robert Morrison had mortgaged everything: his estate, Arthur's trust fund, even Rose's father's restaurants, to keep the illusion alive. Rose hadn't left me for a better life. She'd left me for what she thought was one, only to end up trapped in a house of cards.
I walked over to a framed photo on my bookshelf, a picture of me at a charity gala the previous month, surrounded by scholarship recipients, young people like I had been, smart, hardworking, disadvantaged by circumstances beyond their control. "Do you see this photo, Rose?" She nodded. "These kids remind me of who I used to be. Last year, I established a foundation providing full scholarships to students like them. Why? Because success means nothing if you don't use it to lift others who deserve better. These kids aren't boring or unremarkable. They're just poor, and they shouldn't be punished for that." Rose was crying again. "Jeffrey, I was wrong about everything. But can people change? Can someone learn from their mistakes and become better?" I turned to her. "The question isn't whether people can change, Rose. It's whether you actually have, or if you're just saying what you think I want to hear because you need something from me." "How can I prove it to you?" she asked. "You can't," I said simply. "That's the point. 2 years ago, you called me boring because I couldn't afford fancy restaurants or designer clothes. You married another man because you thought he had money. Now that man is broke, and you're here asking me to save you. Even if I believed you'd changed, which I don't, this relationship would always be built on settling when your first choice failed." Rose stood, chair scraping the floor. "Fine, you want to punish me forever for one stupid decision I made as a barely adult. You want to hold on to anger because it makes you feel powerful. I get it, but the person you're punishing isn't the one who hurt you." "You're right," I said, surprising even myself. "You're not the same person. You're worse. The Rose who dumped me was shallow, yes, but at least she was honest. The Rose in my office now is manipulative, trying to use our history to get what she wants. If Arthur's family suddenly won the lottery tomorrow, would you still be here begging for forgiveness, or would you go back to your glamorous life?" Rose opened her mouth, then closed it. We both knew the answer. "Here's what's going to happen. You're walking out of my office and figuring out your own problems. Learn what it really means to struggle, to work for what you have, instead of expecting others to hand it to you. Maybe losing everything will teach you, like it taught me, who you really are beneath the pretense and privilege." She gathered her purse and walked toward the door. As she reached the handle, she turned back. "I did love you, you know. Maybe not the way I should have, but I did." "No," I said quietly. "You loved the way I made you feel about yourself. That's different." After she left, I sat alone in my office as the sun set. I had won, but it didn't feel triumphant. The angry, hurt young man from 2 years ago would have gloatingly savored her downfall. But I had changed. Revenge was hollow. I didn't need Rose to suffer. I had already proven everything I needed to myself. 6 months later, I stood in the Grand Metropolitan Hotel's reception hall, hosting the annual gala for my scholarship foundation. Over 500 attendees, including business leaders, politicians, and philanthropists, were there to support students like me. The irony was not lost on me. This was the same hotel where Rose and Arthur had held their wedding. But tonight, we celebrated something that mattered: opportunity for those who deserved it. "Mr. Collins, there's someone who wants to meet you." My assistant guided a young woman forward. Sarah Chen, one of this year's scholarship recipients, stood nervously but determined. "Mr. Collins, I wanted to thank you personally. Without this scholarship, I never could have attended university. My family works 16-hour days at a small restaurant just to make ends meet. This opportunity, it's everything." As I spoke with Sarah and other recipients,
I realized my success wasn't about proving my worth to those who underestimated me. It was about creating opportunities for others. Later, I spotted Mike, my former roommate. Jeffrey, man, I can't believe this. When you disappeared from campus, we all thought you'd had a breakdown. Maybe I did, I said, embracing him, but it was the breakdown I needed. He took in the hall, the elegant crowd, the impact of the event. This is incredible. You've built an empire. I've built something better than an empire, I corrected. I've built something that matters. Mike asked carefully, have you heard about Rose and Arthur? I nodded. She came to see me months ago. I know about the bankruptcy, the investigation. He hesitated. Well, Arthur, he tried to commit suicide last month. He's in a psychiatric facility. Rose moved back with her parents and is working at one of their restaurants. I felt a pang, but no malice. Arthur's struggle was real. Rose had learned humility, responsibility. That night, in my penthouse overlooking the city, I reflected on my journey. The revenge I'd imagined had already happened. Rose and Arthur had lost everything, while I had gained everything. But the satisfaction I expected was absent. Instead, I felt compassion. I called my lawyer to set up an anonymous fund for Arthur's treatment and a small business loan for Rose's family restaurant. Not because I wanted them back, not because they deserved it, because true success meant lifting others, not watching them fall. Months later, I received a call from Rose. Mature, grateful, and self-sufficient, she thanked me, not for myself, but for the lessons she'd learned about struggle, work, and self-reliance. 2 years later, I returned to the Grand Metropolitan Hotel for another gala, announcing the Collins Center for Economic Opportunity, a training facility for people leaving poverty. During my keynote, I noticed Rose in the back, taking notes. She looked healthy, confident, and changed. Not desperate, not shallow. Afterwards, she approached. Hello, Jeffrey. The restaurant is thriving. We paid off the loan early. Arthur is doing better, too. I'm glad to hear that, I said. She smiled genuinely. I wanted to thank you for not helping me when I asked. You were right. I needed to solve my own problems. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I realized then that my story wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about transformation for both of us. And the scared, hurt young man who had fled campus 2 years ago was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true success isn't proving others wrong, it's helping others prove themselves right.